The wind howled across the dry plains like a lost soul searching for home. The year was 1887, and dust ruled the land as much as men did. In a forgotten corner of the New Mexico territory, a small crowd gathered under the blistering sun, where desperation met cruelty more often than kindness. Elias Monroe rode into town that morning with one thing in mind: salt blocks for his cattle and a few sacks of grain before the next storm rolled in. He didn't expect his day to change the rest of his life. Near the old trading post, a commotion had gathered, a group of ranch hands, drifters, and traders. Elias dismounted, tying his horse to a post, and pushed through the crowd. That's when he saw her. A young woman stood trembling on a wooden platform. Her hair, the color of wheat at sunset, clung to her face with sweat and dust. Her dress was torn, her eyes hollow yet fierce. Beside her, an older man barked out numbers, his voice sharp like a whip. "This ain't right," Elias muttered, frowning. He didn't know who she was, didn't even know her name, but something in her eyes made him freeze. They weren't the eyes of a stranger. They were eyes that had seen too much pain and still refused to surrender. The man called out again, "All right, gentlemen, who's willing to take responsibility for this woman? She's been through hardship, but she's strong, can cook, sew, and—" Elias didn't need to hear more. He pulled out the only thing that still had meaning in that moment, his father's old silver coin, one he'd sworn never to part with. "I'll take her," he said firmly. The crowd murmured. No one dared challenge him. Elias Monroe was known across the valley, not for his temper, but for his word. When the dust settled and the crowd dispersed, Elias approached the woman gently. "My name's Elias. You don't owe me anything. You're safe now." She didn't speak, only clutched her small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside it, a pair of tiny hand-stitched shoes. Elias realized then she was expecting. He led her to his wagon, offering his coat. The sun dipped low as they rode back across the plains. For miles, silence hung between them, heavy but not empty. After a long while, she whispered, "My name is Clara." That was the only thing she said before sleep took her. For weeks after, Elias made space for her in his small ranch house. He didn't ask questions about where she came from, who had hurt her, or why she seemed to wake screaming some nights. He just made sure she had food, warmth, and safety. But the townsfolk did talk. They always did. Whispers followed Elias to every store and saloon. He brought home a runaway. That woman's trouble. She's not even his wife. Elias didn't care. The prairie had taught him that the opinions of others could be buried in dust, same as bones. Winter came early that year. Clara grew weaker, her pregnancy harder with every cold wind. Elias hired Doc Harris from town, who shook his head after checking her pulse. "She's been through too much," the old doctor sighed. "You'd best pray, Elias." And Elias did. Every night, he sat by her bedside, reading from his worn-out Bible, his voice breaking with hope and fear. "You saved me," she whispered one night, her eyes glistening in the lamplight. "I was left with nothing, and you gave me a name again." "You saved me first," he said softly. Spring came with the sound of crying, not from pain but from new life. Clara gave birth to a baby boy, small but fierce like the desert bloom after a storm. Elias held him gently, feeling something stir inside him that had long been buried, but peace in the West was always borrowed time. Weeks later, a man rode into the valley, a lawman from Santa Fe, wearing a silver star and carrying old papers. He asked for Clara by name. Elias's heart froze. "She's wanted as a witness," the marshal said, "not a criminal. There was a raid last year. She saw something big. Some powerful men don't want her to speak." Elias realized then that Clara's silence had been protection, not just for her, but for the child she carried. When the marshal left, Elias turned to her. "You could go with him. You'd be safe under law protection." Clara shook her head. "My safety is here. My home is here. You gave me that." The ranch became their sanctuary. Seasons changed. The boy grew strong. And so did Clara. Together they rebuilt fences, planted wildflowers near the creek, and watched the sun rise over land that once knew only loneliness. Years later, when travelers passed through the Monroe Ranch, they spoke of the woman with golden hair and eyes like dawn, and the rancher who found her when the world had turned away. Some said Elias saved her that day in town. Others said she saved him from a life without meaning, the truth. They saved each other, and somewhere in the soft winds of the open prairie, their story still whispers of mercy, love, and the courage to start again, even in a world that had forgotten kindness.